To me, that doesn't make sense. To me, that just sounds like you're playing politics because you want a spending bill
It is.
to
That's
pass.
exactly what it is. They're playing politics, right? Because they didn't, and again, too, this is where the messaging is horrible. Is that you know, Senator Schumer was worried that oh, they're gonna pin the shutdown on Democrats. Well, we got to fight back with our messaging to kind of pin it on them. It's they're the ones who are in charge. They control the executive. They control both houses of the legislature. They are in charge. The government shuts down. It was their fault.
All right. Good evening, Gil. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
You know, can't complain too much. So where are you calling from today?
I am in Covina, California, here in the California's 31st district.
Yeah.
So excited to be back here. The weather was great yesterday. It was great pretty much most of the day today, but right now it's raining. Kind of
Yeah.
caught me off guard there.
No, I was in California most of last week, and it rained pretty much every day. So it wasn't the best week for me to be there. But
Yeah.
you know, that's like 3 out of the 52 weeks a year in California. So
It seems to be happening a lot more. I don't know if you're a surfer, Max, or not, but I guess if you are, the waves might have been a little bit better during the rain. But uh,
I've dabbled. I'm more of a mountain biker myself,
okay.
but we'll get into that maybe in a later episode.
Yeah.
Um, how many times a year do you have to fly back as a member of Congress?
Well, they have. I mean, most members kind of go back every weekend, right? But there is one week, at least one week in a month. There is one district work period where you're expected to go back and work in your district,
Hmm.
and that's kind of what we're doing right now. I had a meeting with some local elected officials, mayors, city council members. I think we had a few city managers that came to that meeting this morning. Then I did an event as well with a community event where a bunch of people came to hear me speak. And then, did
Right.
a couple other things. Met with the one of the chiefs of police in the district down in Covina, and now, that's pretty much what my week is going to be. Just kind of getting
Right.
around the
So
district.
six
Yeah.
so six cross country flights a month, basically.
Well, probably, yeah. Well, yeah. If you go every weekend, pretty much, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do you like flying that much?
Um, I don't mind it. You kind of get
Yeah.
used to it, but it is definitely. If I didn't have to do it all the time, I wouldn't.
What
And
airline do you usually
sometimes
fly?
sometimes the flights can be a little long. Like coming back, I came back. I flew back last Saturday. I think we were going into a headwind. It was about a 5.5 hour flight, so it
Yeah.
was not easy. But I usually fly either United or American.
Okay. Yeah. I'm a United guy. American sometimes, or sometimes my parents will stick me on Frontier if they want me to get home. But um, what about? Are you a window seat guy or a aisle
No,
seat
I
guy?
like the aisle.
Okay,
I
me
like the
too.
aisle so I can get up if I have to get up. I don't have to ask anybody to move aside or please get up. But I prefer the aisle. Plus, I can. I'm not that tall, but I like to stretch out my legs a little bit too, and you can put them in the aisle as well.
Yeah, it's tough for me. See, if it's like a short flight though, like 2 hours,
Hmm.
window seat.
All right.
And if it's a longer flight too, like let's say it's like an 8 hour flight or
Okay.
longer, also window seat,
Yeah.
and you can sleep.
Yeah. You put your. It's a good idea. I don't know if you have. I do have one of those like neck roll things that you can put
Yeah.
on there and kind of keep your. It actually keeps your neck straight, so you don't get kind of like sleep all crooked or anything. Um, one colleague told me a while back, like, you know, don't recline your seat. It'll actually make your back hurt if you do that for too long. So
Yeah.
I've been
I
sure
don't
to follow that rule.
I don't like those neck things. My mom gave me one for Christmas one time and I don't like carrying it around the
Yeah.
airport and like it takes up so much space. It's weird. But I don't know. I know a lot about airplanes though. Just
Mhm.
that's why
Oh,
I was
really?
doing this. This is right here. This is my favorite plane. This is a Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner.
Okay.
Um, you've probably flown on one if you've gone like internationally.
Hmm.
But it's fun for the international flights because it's got these big dimmable windows and it's a fully carbon fiber frame. So when you go on the airplane, a lot of times you'll feel jet lag. The
Hmm.
reason for that is actually because of the elevation in the aircraft that it's pressurized to.
Hmm.
but because it's all carbon fiber, they can pressurize it to a lower level. And you
Wow.
don't feel as fatigued or as out of whack when you get off the aircraft. Anyway,
Wow.
that's just some things that I spend my free time
I guess you do know
learning
a lot
about.
about planes.
But
I have actually flown on one, and I flew on one that was pretty nice. I remember the pilot
yeah,
got on there, and he's like, "Hey, this is a brand new plane. It's only been in service for about a month,
yeah,
so enjoy it." And it was
no, they're
actually
cool.
it was a cross country flight. It wasn't international, but
Hmm.
it was a nice plane. I've flown on the 777s too, which are huge.
Okay, you know what? The fact that you even are able to differentiate the aircraft types is music to my ears. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, there's that, and then I guess it's one of the things you pick up when you fly, right? It's like
Yeah,
the 737s seem to be the workhorse of
right,
of both United and American. Some of
right.
them, American has some Airbuses still around that they got from when they merged with U.S. Airways.
That's right. Yeah,
But
they got rid of their A330s. Anyway,
yeah, I will
um,
say this one more thing about planes, though. But I think you would see the old DC-10s, which were
right.
big around like in the 70s and 80s. But FedEx was still flying those for a long
Right.
time, and I think they're kind of starting to get away from those. But
They're
you
still
know,
cargo. That's the death plane
is
because
it?
it crashed.
Wow,
It crashed a couple of times. A lot of people died. I guess you call it the Boeing 737 Max of its time.
wow.
Um,
But they always
but
had that distinct look with the one engine, like in the the tail fin there.
yeah, no, that's right. It had the third one. It's
Yeah.
not as common anymore. Anyway, I would love to go into the wrongdoings and the history of Boeing and everything there, but we'll
Yeah.
save that for a later conversation. I think maybe you and I could get a kick out of that.
All right.
Um, but it is St. Patrick's Day today.
Yes.
Did you get a chance to celebrate?
I did not.
Yeah,
We've kind of been busy all day, but
it's okay. I see you're not wearing green, but you're not Irish,
yeah,
and
I
I'm not
did.
either. So,
I,
um,
I sometimes you get so involved with what's going on, you actually forget what day it was. I did not, and I actually when I flew back to California, I actually have a sports coat that I really like that has like green in it,
yeah,
and I was looking at it this morning, and I thought, no, I think I'll just go with the blue, and but not even kind of thinking like that it was St. Patrick's Day.
yeah. Well, the main reason I bring that up is someone got to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. That was Conor McGregor. Let's see if we can get that photo pulled up. He was at the White House.
Oh wow.
He came to visit Trump.
Hmm.
Are you
Yeah.
a MMA guy, by the way? I haven't asked yet.
You know, I am not, and I will tell you, I used to be a big boxing fan,
Right.
but it's kind of gone away for a while there. Oh, there he is.
Yeah. Look at that. Look who else is in that picture. Just
Yeah,
there.
I think he must live there now. He's like always there. Elon Musk,
For those of you listening, that's Elon Musk, just very awkwardly in the background, um,
giving a
like a
thumbs up.
child that hasn't figured out object permanence yet, holding up his thumb,
Yeah,
um, like he's Trump's little pet. Um, yeah, thoughts on that? Thoughts on
but
seeing
is that
him in?
Conor McGregor? That doesn't really look like him.
Yeah, that's him. Um, I know. I'd agree with you on that one. Little, I think he's shaved a little bit.
Okay, and got like a beard going on now. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not an MMA guy.
Yeah.
I think it's weird. I don't know. Like,
I like the
I don't. Yeah, go
so
ahead.
I was going to say I liked it when it originally started.
Hmm.
Which was I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Bloodsport with Jean
No.
Claude Van Damme. It's like came out in like 1987, 1988, somewhere around there.
Uh huh.
And he plays this guy Frank Dukes. And it's supposed to be a true story. I think the character was real, but nobody could really validate his story, like about him winning this martial arts competition called the Kumite in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And but what the Kumite was, it was like styles versus different styles,
Hmm.
and that's kind of what MMA was when it first started. There was only two rules: no biting, and no you can't poke the guy's eyes out. Everything else was free game. And
Yeah.
the guy who won like the first two out of three was not a big guy at all. His name was I think Horse Gracie. Yeah, I think that, yeah, it was, well, his last name was Gracie. I know that for sure, and I probably mispronounced his first name, but he was only about like 5'8", 5'9", and he would basically get in there. And his family's like, I'm sure you've seen the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Sure.
And he's
Yeah.
part of that.
I did Taekwondo when I was a kid. I had to learn how to protect myself, as one
Yeah.
does.
But you had all these different, like, it was kind of a cool thing because you had all these different, like, styles against each other in there. And this guy, Gracie, won it basically choking everybody out. He would, and it would look like he was losing, and then he'd just get you in a row. You'd leave him an opening, and then he'd just choke you out, and then people would kind of like call out and say like to end. But it was it was violent, you
Sure.
know. So they actually had to kind of make rules for it to kind of help it evolve, and then it kind of became the rule or the sport that it is now. But it didn't.
So back then was MMA. Did you have to be a Republican to watch MMA like you are now, or was
No,
it different?
no, I don't think you have to be a
'Cause to me, that's
Republican
how I
now to
see it.
watch it. I look. You don't have to be a Republican now to watch it. There's a lot of people I know that are Democrats that watch it that
Sure.
get into it. It's kind of become, now just another form of of boxing, right? It's kind of became its own in a way, its own martial arts. Um, where now
Right.
it's they have these MMA gyms and you got to be doing this and there's rules and everything. But I kind of like I still kind of think about the pureness of how it was at the beginning, where you had these different martial arts styles. There were no rules, and you had these big guys. There was no weight classes, so you had little guys, fighting big guys. And again, the guy who won it the first 2 out of 3 was not a big guy at all. But it was I kind of like it at the beginning. But again, they people didn't like it because they thought it was too violent and there was no rules, and a lot of states weren't wouldn't sanction the bouts, so they had to kind of develop the rules and kind of created this whole new sport. But it's look at some of the, like, when you go back UFC 1, UFC 2, right, some of those earlier ones, and kind of see what it was. And there was no time limit either. Now they have
Right.
rounds. There was no round. It was just you went, and there was no rounds.
Have you ever been in a fight?
Oh my God, not since I was like a little kid.
What does little kid mean?
I mean, like, 10, 11.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's different.
Yeah.
Not as a teenager. Ever.
No,
Not like a high school skirmish, anything like that.
no, never got into anything like that when I was in high school.
Good. That's I think that plays a role in this conversation. So I'm happy for that.
Okay.
But speaking of Elon Musk, though, I wanted to get into him a little bit more.
Right.
I hate to do this because it seems like everyone is getting into him these days,
Mhm.
but he did go on Ted Cruz's new podcast. So, there's other members of Congress making their rounds in the space, and they had a conversation. And
Mhm.
as much as I don't want to talk about what was said on the show, we got to talk about this thread here. When they're listening to this, they're talking about DOGE as an institution and the constitutionality of what has happened so far.
Mhm.
And Elon Musk is going to make the argument, you're going to listen here, that everything is transparent and there's no possible way that anything they're doing could be unconstitutional. But I want to hear your thoughts on this, and then we'll talk. Play it, Amy.
And we're very public about what we do.
Yeah, you put it on the website.
It's on the website. I don't know how we could be more transparent. Literally every action we do, small or large, we put on the doge.gov website, and we post on the X handle. And when people complain about it, and they say, "Oh, you're doing something unconstitutional," I'm like, "Well, which of these cost
You're doing it in
savings?"
the daylight. I mean, everyone knows exactly what you're doing.
Extreme transparency.
Yeah.
So I don't think anything's been this transparent ever.
So
God.
5 years ago, you were a hero to the left. You were cool. You had electric cars.
Yeah, not everything he's done is constitutional.
No, I don't think nothing he's done is transparent either, and not even a lot of what they're posting on that side is even true. They've miscounted numbers, they double counted things, they counted contracts that had already expired as kind of things that they've stopped. it took him, I think, 2 weeks before he actually, 2 weeks after the date he said he would put something up there. So that's not very transparent. So they're not doing, it's, you have to, in order, here's the hard part for me, right? It's, they're saying, oh, I'm cutting this and we're saving this and we're saving that. But you just have to, in order to believe that, you have to take him at his word.
Right.
Let's not trust the facts. Let's not trust actually what people are digging into and finding. Let's just kind of, let's just, okay, we'll take you at your word that yes, everything is on the up and up here.
Well, as much as someone like, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, as much as someone like Elon Musk, his whole play is he's like, I'm the Silicon Valley expert and I'm the numbers guy and the numbers don't lie and we're going to throw all these things up here on this website and, every American can understand and see what's happening for themselves. There's a goldmine of ways you can lie with statistics. And beyond that, as you've mentioned earlier, there's a number of ways that the numbers that DOGE has put up have already been proven false. But even beyond that, talking about the constitutionality of all of this, there have been entire government agencies slashed and done away with. USAID is a great example of that. Essentially by the actions of someone who is an unelected bureaucrat, let alone a member of Congress who's passed something through a federal budget, which means that this is an abuse of executive power and an abuse of the taxpayer dollars that Americans have spent without any checks from other branches of government. Congress didn't pass any of these discretionary funding cuts, and the courts have not interpreted them to be valid. And you can challenge that, but again, a big reason and play for what Elon Musk and DOGE and ultimately the Trump administration is all about right now is saying that, well, we're the executive branch, we enforce the laws.
Yeah.
What's a court going to say to us?
Yeah, it is. This is very unethical what they're doing, and it's not constitutional. Look, when I was at the Department of Defense, they went through all my holdings, right? Stocks, bonds,
Sure.
Muni bonds, everything. And they told me what I could have and what I couldn't have. And it was pretty much anything within the top 100 defense contracting contracts I couldn't own.
So they made you sell off your assets when you took the job.
I had to sell.
You couldn't even do a blind trust.
Correct.
Okay.
So we had to sell all these things off. You had to do that, right? Because you were working in the administration and because you were a government employee. We still don't know if he's a government employee or not. They kind of say he's like a special assistant, but, and they have another person that's listed as the DOGE administrator, but, he's the one who's calling the shots, and they don't even kind of go around that, right? He's like, oh, this is what I'm doing. This is what DOGE is doing, what he's doing. He's doing all this stuff, and he's admitting doing all this stuff, but he's supposedly not the person in charge. So, the thing right now, the most unethical thing, right, is if he can't be the CEO, if he's a government employee, and so they haven't made him officially a government employee, but if he were a real government employee, kind of doing the things that he's doing, he wouldn't be able to be the CEO of SpaceX. He wouldn't be allowed to be the CEO of Tesla and any other company that he owns, that he's the administrator getting paid by them. And the other thing is, that's worse too, right, is that, okay, if you're not a government employee, if you're not doing this job and the title that you keep saying you are, but the administration somehow saying, oh, no, it's actually this woman who's kind of pulling the strings there.
So you're saying all of this is illegal?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So should Elon Musk be in jail then?
Oh, my God. Well, look, they would... the ethics thing, he's supposed to, if he's a government employee, he's supposed to file a form again, right? But the thing is, they haven't officially made him a government employee. And so if he isn't a government employee, he shouldn't be doing all this business with the government, kind of in there and the ins and outs, looking at information. I mean, he had a damn meeting with the NSA, the National Security Council. I mean, are we just letting him into secret information that that he has no clearance for. It's nuts and it's crazy that they are doing this and they are giving him that much power.
Yeah. So we're gonna make you even more angry now. Let's play this next clip. And then we'll move on from Elon, as you probably want to. But later in this play, we're getting on the topic of why do we have this waste in the government that DOGE is supposed to go after, and why is the left so angry at what DOGE has done so far? Listen to his explanation.
You had space, and in 5 years you've gone.
I could go to a party in Hollywood and not get dirty looks.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah.
And
Now you might not even get invited.
I think
Still get invited, but I don't know if I should go.
and I don't think it's an exaggeration to say today, after Donald Trump, the left hates you more than any person on earth.
Yes, I appear to be number 2. I mean, if you're judged by the various signs,
it's derangement. It's Trump derangement syndrome and Elon derangement syndrome.
Yes.
How is it that for you? That's a little bit of whiplash of going from being like Mr. Cool to the devil incarnate in just a couple of years. Is that kind of weird to experience that transformation?
Yes.
Why do they hate you so much?
Well, because we're clearly over the target. If DOGE was ineffective, if we were not actually getting rid of a bunch of waste and fraud, and a bunch of that fraud, the fraud we're seeing is overwhelmingly on the left.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not zero on the right, but these NGOs are almost all left-wing NGOs that are being funded, for example.
Yep.
So they hate me because DOGE is being effective, and DOGE is getting rid of a lot of waste and fraud that people on the left were taking advantage of. That's what it comes down to. And the single biggest thing that they're worried about is that DOGE is going to turn off fraudulent payments of entitlements. Everything from Social Security, Medicare, unemployment, disability, small business administration loans, turn them off to illegals. This is the crux of the matter.
Yep.
Okay. This is the thing that why they really hit my guts and want me to die.
And do you think that's billions, hundreds of billions? What do you think the scale is of that?
Listen to his explanation.
Across the country, it's well north of 100 billion, maybe 200 billion. By using entitlements fraud, the Democrats have been able to attract and retain vast numbers of illegal immigrants
and buy voters.
And buy voters, exactly.
All right, you can shut it off here. So he goes on to say that the entire Democratic Party's electoral strategy is by letting illegal immigrants into the country, supporting them with government entitlement programs and federally funded NGOs, to the point where those voters and creating a path to citizenship that way, to the point where those voters are locked into the Democratic Party and become voters, and the cycle repeats itself as we get more illegals in, and they go on to say how we would eventually become a socialist state like California, what Ted Cruz describes it.
Oh my God.
I can't think of a more self-righteous analysis of a party. Imagine thinking that the other side is so wrong and that their ideas are just so out of touch that the only way that they can survive electorally is by importing illegal immigrants to vote for them.
It's right-wing propaganda, and it's demented in the sense that it's not true. And we know the facts, right? There is very small number of actual voter fraud that takes place here in the United States. And the last big case that I can think of was actually a Republican in North Carolina who committed the fraud, and they had to redo the election. Which was unfair to the Democrat who would have won.
The biggest voter fraud was when Trump called Georgia's Secretary of State in 2020 after the election and said, "I need votes. Find them for me."
Find them for me.
And credit to the Secretary of State of Georgia. He said no.
Yeah.
But I don't see anything clear of election meddling than that.
No. And look, they don't have that proof, right? And there's no fraud of. And look, I'm not going to say nothing is ever perfect, right? I'm sure
Sure.
people abuse the system, but the fraud is not coming within. And look, if this was taking place, it's just all didn't happen in the last 4 years, right? If they're claiming what they said, I mean, maybe they think it did, but you know, it was not. There are no illegal payments. Most undocumented immigrants are living in the shadows. They don't take government services. They don't even want to go to the hospital unless they absolutely have to, because they don't want to be put a light on themselves to kind of get out there where they kind of risk the fact that they may get picked up or kind of be deported. And so to say that they're doing all this stuff, they're doing illegal activity, they're getting funding for businesses, they're taking advantage of all these things, that the Democrats are actually making payments to them to get them on the payroll so that they'll vote Democrats. This isn't the 19th century with the party boss system where they were kind of doing that. I guess the Irish immigrants who were coming in at the time.
That's what it feels like a little bit,
Yeah.
but yeah.
But that's it's almost like they're reading a book of how that used to happen. And it's just not the case. It is not the case. And if it is, I want to see the proof. Show us the proof. Right? What are you uncovering? Show us.
Yeah.
Let's see how transparent you are then. And just saying it is not proof. You have to show it.
Yeah, and it's a shame to me because I don't think most Americans hear that and think, yes, this is a reasonable ruler or a reasonable character that we want in charge of our country and sets our moral code and our ethical code and our ideological code.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, it's not like voters look at that and look to the Democratic Party and see a shining alternative option right now. We're going to get another piece of information up on the screen here for a second, but I believe it was a CNN poll, Jamie. Yeah. We had a CNN poll that was released this morning. I don't know if you've been shown it yet. That showed the favorability rating of the Democratic Party today versus, we can share that. Today versus 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, Democrats have a 57% unfavorability rating, which is, I mean, okay. But for context, for when we talk about what's up here, the Democratic favorability rating has dropped significantly over the past 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the main cause of that between now and then when Trump was president in both times?
Yeah, I think there's several reasons, right? It's hard to just pin it on one thing.
Sure.
For some people, the last 8 years or the last 4 years, I will say, was could be tough financially, right? Inflation was up, things were more expensive. Even though the economy did well overall, the stock market went up the last 8 years. The infrastructure bill helped provide jobs and work. Even though salaries went up, the inflation didn't really was countered. The inflation kind of countered the raises and everything. So people weren't actually putting more money in their pocket. And then the messaging, right? I think we are not very good at messaging, and we are losing that battle. And we have let them define us. And we need to get out there and play some offense and get out there and really kind of make our case to the American people. And I think a lot of it is too, which is one of the reasons why we're doing this now. We're doing this podcast is to get out in this new media where Republicans are ahead. Like you just saw it. Isn't the first time Senator Ted Cruz had his own podcast. Like I said, we said last time Matt Gaetz had one. Other people had them. I think they even have a website. That shows all the Republican podcasts out there. They were being guests going on these shows a lot earlier than we did. And so, we're playing.
But that to me says that, and I've noticed this too, and it's frustrated me as a 22-year-old with I guess you call progressive politics,
Mm-hmm.
is that it seems as though when it comes to messaging, the Democrats have this risk averse factor, at least some of the mainstream portion of the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I've never understood that when the Democrats, on most of the issues, they win. They win on healthcare.
Yeah.
They win on tax brackets, as boring
Mm-hmm.
as that is.
Yeah.
They win on right to marriage. They win on abortion rights. The Democratic Party wins on a lot of issues. So why is there this sort of press release centered CNN media hit, at least previously, thought process in the Democratic Party that has sort of led Democrats to not want to dip their toes into things like social media and other digital forms of content?
I don't look. I don't know if it's that we don't want to, right? I just don't think it's really kind of been encouraged. And now that's changing. I think they are trying to push people to get out there and do digital podcast and to do different things. And there's a couple other members that I think are trying to start their show. I think there's a show I think the DCCC is doing now called WTF, which stands for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, where they're looking for people to get on there and kind of just do like 15 or 20 minutes something on there with another member. So it's out there, right? I think we're pushing it, but you're right in the sense that I think it was the Washington Post did some polling and things, right? When you kind of looked at the issues, and they had a number of issues that they looked at. And when you looked like the Democratic, and it was kind of blind in the sense they didn't say like who's for this or who's that, but this is, they asked people about an issue, and it was like whether they were closer to the Democratic opinion on this issue or to the Republican issue. More times than not, they partnered with the Democratic issue.
Right.
But I think that's again where it comes down to our messaging is that we just don't know how to message that, and we've let them define us as to what we're about, and they've done a good job. I mean, when you kind of look at this like as an outsider, you go, wow, they're really good what they do, and they've had people that have been more involved with it, kind of getting out there, and the truth doesn't matter. I mean, Breitbart is not about telling the truth when they first came out, and other websites like that. There's more right wing, websites out there too, right? That are pushing that agenda out there as to, that are, there's probably a lot more right wing websites out there that are pushing the DOGE and all the fraud that they're uncovering rather than, Democratic websites or progressive websites that are pushing the opposite view as like, hey, they're not finding anything, and this is what they're doing to kind of make up the numbers.
Yeah, and the truth is, this dynamic, it's not fair. Especially when we're talking about building up a new media apparatus, because let's look at this whole situation honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Left-wing media has not grown off the point that right-wing new media has. Why is that the case? Right-wing has tons and tons of funding and infrastructure behind it. You look at institutions like the Daily Wire, which have 9-figure budgets, right? Mm-hmm. And you compare that to maybe a network of people on the left that have, I don't know, the David Pakmans of the world, and some other, radio hosts. Then you have some bigger people that I think contribute to the conversation. Some of the late night hosts, the Seth Meyers and the John Olivers of the world, certain that picture. Mm-hmm. That being said, it's much easier to fund an infrastructure like that kind of grows in its own for a very ideological purpose when you are not the party fighting for corporate tax cuts and regulations on our corporations and ending things like Citizens United, which allows for unlimited independent spending in our elections, right? It's not easy to incentivize that. So it's not a fair fight. It's not, the right wins all the time with new media because they just have better messages and better ideas. No. It's easier for those who have the hands that feed
Yeah.
feed right-wing media.
Well,
And I think that's something
I
we
think
don't
you're right
consider.
that people have invested in that because they're, again, um, it's about money, it's about profit, right? And people are seeing
Right.
profit in these right wing apparatuses there where they can kind of go and promote them and
Hmm.
invest in them and they kind of make money off of them.
Hmm.
And that's kind of what's happening right now. And yeah, unfortunately, that really hasn't happened on the left, right?
Time for a quick message from our sponsors.
This episode of Who Dem is brought to you by Elect Dems Now. We all know that podcasts are the future. They give us the chance to connect with our elected officials like never before. That's why Elect Dems Now is committed to helping voters engage with the people who represent us. Supporting organizations that bring us closer to our representatives is crucial to advancing and advocating for the change we want to see. Whether it's $5 or $50, every donation to Elect Dems Now helps shape our future and ensures a country we can all be proud of. Your support sends a clear message to candidates and elected officials. Connecting with you means connecting with America. To contribute and make a difference, visit electdemsnow.org today. Your donation helps build a world where we are all connected. Paid for by Elect Dems Now, electdemsnow.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. And speaking of messages, I want to put up another graphic here. This came out today from Courier. They polled, I believe it's Democratic voters. We'll get that confirmed in a second. Of which character in the Democratic Party currently, this is former and current elected officials, best represents the core values of the Democratic Party. And you're going to see a lot of names here. You see AOC's first at 10%, Kamala Harris second, though, and then Bernie Sanders third. So you 1 and 3, you got two of the biggest voices that represent kind of the left progressive wing of the party. But then Hakeem Jeffries at 4, which is very much not that. And then Obama, and then you have, I guess, people like Newsom down there a little bit more, even Chuck Schumer. But I guess take a second to look at those names on there, or maybe the lack thereof, certain names.
Well, I think when you look at that list, right, I think two of the three, and Alexandra and Bernie Sanders there have kind of really, they've been ones who've kind of taken advantage of social media and this new media to kind of get out
Sure.
there, get their message, and really communicate what it is they support. And I think Kamala Harris is just up there because, she was the presidential candidate for the
Sure.
still kind of fresh in everybody's mind. But I think that's, look, I think that's why it is, right? I
Sure.
think, those two, the senator and Alexandria are kind of both out there, and she's great on social media. She's probably the best, of the Democrats out there that are kind of getting out there and getting her message out there, and it's allowed her to kind of be successful in that sense, right? Where
Yeah.
I think, where people kind of think that more progressive liberal view is the Democratic Party, but again, nobody knows who the New Democratic Coalition is, right? Which is a more moderate face, has more members in their caucus than any other thing. And really, if you kind of got to look at it, that's the message that's out there, right? That's the lack of a message that's out there, right? That people don't know that.
So do you think that message, that I guess the core values of the New Democratic Coalition,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that's what truly represents the median of Democratic voters, and it's just not being projected enough currently? Or do you think there's a fundamental divide between the majority of members of Congress in right now that are
No,
Democrats and
because
the voters?
the people in the New Democratic Coalition were elected, right? They were elected by Democrats. They were
Sure.
elected by people, that, these people represent my views and my point of view, and that's why they voted for, the members in that caucus.
Right.
So I don't think it's out of whack. I would say what's out of whack is the fact that it doesn't get enough press coverage.
Yeah.
There's nobody. There's some good members in there, and they probably do a lot of local media, like in their thing, but a lot of them don't really get like a lot of, attention.
Is there,
on the national level?
out of anyone you've met in that conference, who's someone that, if you think just got a little bit more screen time, whether it's on the national outlets or maybe even on some, new media shows, that you think would just thrive in the limelight and people would love, like the voter base would enjoy seeing more of, that doesn't have that spotlight right now currently?
Um, I mean, there's a lot of members I think that could
Yeah.
kind of do that in that role, and I'm trying to think in my head.
I remember
Um,
you guys used to have Tim Ryan in Congress.
yeah.
He was a little bit more on the moderate side, but
Mhm.
every time he spoke, I felt as though his speeches were going viral. He had a lot of good press in his midterm campaign when he lost, unfortunately, to JD Vance back in 2022.
Yeah.
Um, but I miss his speeches to the floor. I think that Midwestern Democratic voice is something that we don't see. We truly do see a lot of the people who are on the coast and resonate with, unfortunately,
Hmm.
people in liberal cities.
Yeah.
And I don't think that needs to be the case. I don't think Alyssa Slotkin is there yet. I think she gave a great speech, but
I think she'll get, look, I think, I served with her in Congress before. I think she's
mhm,
great. I think she's, brilliant on a lot of things, great national security mind.
sure.
She is someone in her district there and in Michigan when she in her Senate election where she was able to cross,
Yeah.
party lines. Somebody who was able to kind of, that she didn't just appeal to Democrats. She appealed to, to moderates and those independent voters and some Republicans. I mean, she got Liz Cheney to come out and, and campaign for her. So there is, I think,
Sure.
she's there. I think people just got to get to know her better.
Yeah, and I think that this conversation probably reflects a lot of the divide in the Democratic Party, because I know personally, just talking from younger Democrats who
Mhm.
are now just starting to vote, or even in the media that I see on the left part of the party sometimes, there are people who wouldn't want to vote for her because of her association with Liz Cheney. I think most Democrats,
Yeah.
even people who are your hardcore Bernie Sanders supporters or people who weren't going to vote for Hillary in 2016 because of what happened to Bernie in terms of him losing the primary,
Mhm.
most of those people I think would still vote for her, but there's a few that wouldn't.
And,
And
and
to
I
me,
and I think that's
yeah,
bad, right? I think that's wrong because Liz Cheney has not been out there. uh, they don't agree on a lot of issues. I can tell you that. And it wasn't like she went out there because, hey, she's going to push, the Liz Cheney agenda. Liz Cheney's been on a crusade to save, democracy here in the United States, right? And to campaign against Trump, and that's why she kind of went there and campaigned for Alyssa Slotkin.
yeah.
Um,
I have a tough time trying to decide what to think of Liz Cheney. First, you see the movie Vice. I don't know if you've seen that,
I did, yeah.
of Dick Cheney's life,
Hmm.
and the way they present her, coming to her family and asking for permission to essentially
Yeah.
go against gay
Hmm.
marriage to win the election, and how it affects
Yeah.
her sister. Um, and then kind of, you know, Cheney's history in Congress as a hardline conservative.
Yeah. I mean, she was very. I served on Armed Services Committee with her back then in 19 and 20. I mean, she was very big pro nuclear weapons. Very big. She was always praising Donald Trump too and the great job that he was doing.
Right.
But I think, you know, and none of that I don't think has changed. Right. Again, I don't think I would agree with her on like 90% of the issues, and where we should be, but her change kind of recently has come about because of the fact that Donald Trump refused to accept the results of the 2020 election. He was trying to do what you said earlier, right? Kind of force the Georgia Secretary of State to like find me 11,000 votes. And I give her credit for standing up for that, right, and kind of going against her party to
No,
back because it
1000%.
would save democracy. And again, like don't agree with her on like the core issues and stuff like that. But I have to. It's her, and there's a couple of other ones that kind of left and kind of been outspoken about Donald Trump and really the threat to democracy that he is, and she's been one of them.
It's always the ones once they leave Congress, right? I was I was on
Well, she
set.
was. I mean, she was
Yeah.
actually doing it when she was in Congress, right?
She was.
Remember,
She gets credit for it.
she was on the January 6th committee when no other Republican
Yeah.
would agree to be as part of that committee. They even politicized the attack on the nation's capital, but she did it. So, and I mean, she paid the price for it, right? They went after her, they primaried her, and they got somebody to run against her and
Yeah.
take her out.
Yeah. Speaking of character divides and ideological divides within the Democratic Party, last week was a pretty big step in that
Yeah.
narrative
Mhm.
with, I think, House Dems unanimously or almost unanimously, maybe
Right.
one out of
Everybody but one.
two. You
Yeah.
guys have 216 right now, something like that.
Hmm.
Voted
Well,
against.
we're kind of down to I think 213 now. We had we had a couple deaths.
Right.
Rep Taylor from Houston, and then Raul Grava from just
Right.
passed away at the end of last week as well. But he had been getting treated for cancer, so he hasn't really been there to vote anyway.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we lost one member out of all our people there.
Right. From Houston. It's unfortunate.
I'm talking
But-
one person from the vote. One person from the vote.
Right. Yes.
On
From the vote.
Yeah.
So the House Dems were fairly united
Right.
in the vote against the CR.
Mm-hmm.
In the Senate, it's different. We had 10 Democrats vote with the Republicans to keep the government open
Right.
with the CR.
Yeah.
Chuck Schumer leading the pack of those
Mm-hmm.
10. You voted against the bill.
I did.
Why'd you vote against it? And
'Cause
why
it
is it
was
so
a-
important for Democrats to vote against it?
It was a bad bill. It was a bad bill. They were calling it a continuing resolution, which it wasn't. It was a funding bill that kept most of the levels at last year's, at what it was last year, but they cut $13 billion from non-defense spending. And even though they put more money into defense, it wasn't the amount that was agreed upon at the NDAA, so there's still a shortage there. I think the number I was told was about $3 billion. So there's still not enough to cover everything that was approved, when they voted on that last Congress.
Right.
And so it was just a bad bill. And look, I didn't want a government shutdown. Nobody wanted a government shutdown. But I wasn't going to vote for a bad bill. And it wasn't, to me, it wasn't a choice of keep the government open or keep the government closed, but really about, am I going to support a bad bill that gives Donald Trump, more power and an open checkbook to go and do, whatever he wants to do? Or am I going to vote against it and protect, the legislature, the House of Representatives, the branch of government, the equal branch of government that I was elected to? To me, that's
people
what it was about.
People like Chuck Schumer said that they voted for this bill to avoid a government shutdown, to avoid allowing Elon and DOGE and the executive power to essentially run rampant and run unchecked during this government shutdown in their effort to slash government spending unchecked. To me, I think that's a load of horseshit because they're going to do that anyway.
Right. And they are.
But what's your message to Chuck Schumer and the other Democrats who voted for this bill?
I would say it was very, I don't know, I felt very defeated at the end of last week because we had stuck together. We had done this and we thought, Chuck Schumer came out on Wednesday and said, Senate Dems are united. We're going to be united on this. And then the next day he changed the story. And so my wife was like, oh God, what did they do to him? What do they have on him? Where he changed it so quick. I don't know that he was blackmailed, but, I feel, it was almost like an arrogant attitude that he thought well, I know what's best. You guys don't. So I'm going to do what I think is best because I know better than you do. And it was, again, they supported a bad bill. And a lot of them, and here's the crappy part too, right? Is a lot of them are going to take credit for voting against the bill because they did. They voted for the cloture, and then they voted So the cloture ended the what you said, like ended the thing. It got rid of the filibuster. You couldn't do that, so they got past that 60 vote threshold.
Yeah.
Now it only needed a simple majority in order to pass, and it only passed with 54 votes. I think there was two Democrats that voted for it. One I think Republican voted against it. But
So they're virtue signaling.
oh yeah, I mean, a lot of them are going to say, "Oh no, I voted against that bill." Okay, technically, you could probably say you did, but you didn't support the cloture, which never would have allowed it to come up for a vote.
I don't. To me, that doesn't make sense. To me, that just sounds like you're playing politics because you want a spending bill.
It is.
To pass.
That's exactly what it is. They're playing politics, right? Because they didn't, and again, too, this is where the messaging is horrible. Is that, Senator Schumer was worried that, they're gonna pin the shutdown on Democrats. Well, we got to fight back with our messaging to kind of pin it on them. They're the ones who are in charge. They control the executive. They control both houses of the legislature. They are in charge. The government shuts down. It was their fault.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I don't like. To me, that just says you're scared. You're
Yeah.
scared of Fox News going and saying, "Oh, Chuck Schumer is the reason our government's not working right now." When government funding is getting like every time I remember my first memories of government shutdowns as a kid in elementary school, where we'd get the Time for Kids magazine and they'd show all the trash piled up in national parks because all the federal workers aren't there to do it during government shutdown.
Yeah.
And to me, based on what I'm hearing about certain cuts DOGE has made to our national parks and to other important federal institutions, there's not going to be that much of a difference between that.
He's going to take away
anyway.
two monuments that were just put in place in California, two national monuments. Trump's going to take them away.
Right. So I don't know what government affairs specialists and lobbying interests are, in Chuck Schumer's office that want to make sure the Democrats keep this thing open.
Yeah.
But to me, it just doesn't make sense if you support our institutions and you support making sure that funding doesn't get cut from things people need. What is it? I actually don't have the list of agencies off the top of my head. I think HUD was one of the main ones that had some major cuts.
32,000 people could lose their home, and it was over like $700 million, I think, was going to be cut
Right.
from HUD. People support people in Section 8 housing and other grants and stuff to help homeless people, transition housing. It's big. It was big.
So, just to be clear, the real implications of Democrats playing politics so that they don't have to get slaughtered and gone after on Fox News because they didn't keep the government open is going to result in real people not having access to the government assistance.
Right.
It allows them to stay off the streets and not be literally homeless.
Yeah.
That's the gravity of the situation.
Yeah. This was a purely partisan bill, not with no Democratic input at all. And the only leverage we had was to kind of bring them to the table, was to hold them to the cloture, to get Democrat Senate Dems to vote for it, to vote no on it, so that they couldn't take that funding bill to the table for a vote, and they gave it up. And look, the government would have shut down, but I don't think and some people would have been laid off, and they would have kept essential employees. But I think the argument was kind of baseless, that they said, well, he'll be able to do more destruction. They can say who's essential employees, and then they'll stay. But those people are going to work for free forever. At some point, you have to open the government back up in order to get people paid in salaries. They're not going to work, for nothing. You couldn't take this for 6 months.
No.
The last time that we had a partial shutdown when I came to Congress in 2019, that started in 2008, was the last time the Republicans were in charge, where they had the House, the Senate, and the executive branch. they refused to kind of negotiate
Yeah.
a new kind of contract. But eventually they did. They came to the table, and we were able to pass a funding bill that included a lot of things, and it helped the American people.
And even from a political standpoint, right? Let's say
Mhm.
the government does go into a shutdown.
Right.
Then you have leverage.
Yeah.
Then you have some negotiating power, at least,
Hmm.
when deciding our next spending bill. And the Democrats have none of that right now.
Right.
So to me, I don't see, obviously, no one wants to go into a government shutdown.
Hmm.
It's not a place you want to be.
Yeah.
But when the government, it's a government shutdown or passing a funding bill that's going to increase homelessness
Mhm.
and increase joblessness
Right.
in our country.
Take away health care. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
And I guess that as we wrap things up here, I kind of wanted to make this a conversation. Yeah, about civility, and just how we can have conversations about this time. I saw a town hall clip from a few weeks ago, from a Republican in Georgia. I think it was Rep. McCormick,
Hmm.
whose voters were, or his constituents were going after him for enabling the Trump executive authority and
Right.
allowing him to run rampant.
Right.
And he got very defensive. He was yelling, telling people to quiet down and not talk, which is reasonable, but he wasn't using it in the purpose of answering people's questions.
Yeah.
I know you've got a town hall tomorrow.
Hmm.
A, if you've got voters like that, what's the best course of action you take? And B, what's the message you want to send to your constituents tomorrow when you're at your town hall?
Look, the message I'm going to take is really just to answer their questions, right? And I think, I'm still working for them. I am their biggest advocate. I
Right.
still want to be able to pass legislation, and in the small business committee, we've been able to do that. I had a bill that got passed through the House. Hopefully, the Senate takes it up; it'll become law. That'll help, better track numbers that should lead to more federal contracts, hopefully for disadvantaged individuals, veterans, and women, small business owners.
Mhm.
And so these are,
Yeah, you worried Elon Musk and the Republicans are going to call that handouts and DEI welfare?
again, right? This is part of the story that people don't understand. It is not easy to get a government contract.
Sure.
They just don't, unless you're, Vice President Cheney handing them out to like all your buddies and stuff. During the Iran,
Halliburton, yeah.
yeah, during the Iraq War and Afghan War, that's pretty easy. But for small businesses, they have to. There's usually a proposal they have to make. They usually have to go argue for that orally and go up there and talk about what it is they're going to do and how the contract will work for them. There are a lot of steps to get a government contract, and it's unfortunate the government doesn't always take care of them. There are, we had a small business roundtable with some small businesses last week, and a lot of those contracts were put on hold. Some of them were stopped, and people aren't getting paid. They money that is still owed to them. They are not getting paid. And look, and I'm sure Elon Musk is going to count this as part of his, the fraud that we're getting rid of, right? Because, the business owner may have been a woman. The business owner may have been black.
Yeah, no, if it's not a someone who's white that does the business that we're
Right.
doing or is
Yeah.
hired, it's fraud. It's DEI.
fraud. Yeah.
Government doesn't need it.
And that's crazy. It's crazy that they can kind of push that agenda and people think that, but it is unfortunate, right? That that these businesses are having to suffer and not having the resources to kind of they're losing money because they're not getting paid by the government. Who owes them?
Yeah, to me, it's an interesting dilemma because right now the whole message of Musk and Trump and with this new Department of Government Efficiency is, oh, we're going to cut waste, we're going to cut unnecessary spending. But as someone who has at least taken a few basic economics classes, when the government spends money, it doesn't just go nowhere.
All right.
It creates jobs.
Mm-hmm.
It results in investment in businesses.
Yes.
It creates opportunity for people.
Right.
And to me, that's a hell of a lot better than, allowing money to sit in tax cuts for our richest Americans, which is what Trump has a history of doing.
Right.
We can look to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to see that.
Mm-hmm.
And right now hasn't shown any signs of not continuing to do that.
Right.
So if we want everyone to have money and to have the funds we need to buy things as prices continue to increase,
Mm-hmm.
cutting government spending isn't necessarily the fiscal response that's going to be best for most Americans. And I think it's important to understand that when we think about, cutting waste, everything is waste.
Yeah.
Not exactly the case.
Right. Well, look, they're trying to find $2 trillion so they can extend those tax cuts and even reduce them and allow him to keep a lot of his promises that were kind of out there. And so, we'll see what happens, right? But, there's no economic thought into this, right? This is just purely what they are doing, and they're trying to cut and is to create, the $2 trillion so they can provide that tax cut, which is, it's going to help some, but it ain't going to help the majority of, the working class people that are out there that
Right.
really use the benefit of a tax cut because it's not going to them. It's the top line that they're cutting, top rate.
Right. All right. Well, it's Monday, St. Patrick's Day.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happened today. And that's what we, have focused on. But that is less than 5% of what we even have time to talk about. And it sucks because I want to talk about it all.
Yeah.
But we'll have to get to the rest next week.
All right.
But
Well, if you got time and you can, and you don't have any classes to go and study for, no exams coming up, go enjoy a pint for St. Patrick's Day. All right.
yeah,
Guinness.
absolutely. A pint or maybe 3. So, hell yeah.
All right.
All right. Have a good night, Congressman.
All right. You too, Max. Take care.